All right, we are here Tuesday afternoon. NFL free agency is just a day and a half old. We're going to break down some of the worst signings in the NFL with Rich Hribar, Ray Summerlin, and myself, Warren Sharp, here on the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. Let's dig into it. All right, Ray, let's start right with you. And you're going to dive into a team that spent a ton of money in free agency and a lot on their defense specifically. They signed a lot of players on Monday, the first day of, I guess, technically it's not free agency yet. It's legal tampering period, but we all know what it means. They brought a lot of guys on board on defense, but you think one of them was one of the worst signings that you have seen so far. Why don't you elaborate on why you dislike their signing of Kwity Paye a little bit?
Yeah, and I actually think we're going to have a lot of, as we go through this free agency class, just based on some of the notes I've seen from y'all, we're going to have a lot of disagreements about the Raiders and kind of what they've been doing. Obviously, they traded away Max Crosby. It was something that had to be done. The relationship was broken. They seem to get they got a really good return for him. So I'm not, pushing back against that. But I just, when I look at them spending as much money as they did on Kwity Paye, Paye is a good run defender, has been a good run defender. He can help replace that aspect of what they're losing in Max Crosby. But of course, the thing about Max Crosby being a good run defender and being very effective, but just like you notice him in the run game because he's making plays in the backfield. Part of that also comes with he also makes plays in the backfield in the passing game as well as a pass rusher. And that's just not really what you're getting, not what Kwity Paye has traditionally been throughout his career. He does have some good sack seasons for the Colts. He had an 8-sack season, 8.5 sack season. That's pretty good. He has a 9.5 career pressure rate. And I just think you can get that if you're trying to replace that specific aspect of Max Crosby and saying, all right, we need a good run defender that can also play on the edge and maybe get after the quarterback a little bit. I just think you could probably get that player for a lot cheaper and elsewhere. They did re-sign Malcolm Kuntz, and I have a love affair with Malcolm Kuntz. I'd like to see a healthy version of him, what that looks like. I think they can cobble some things together. I did like the Nakobe Dean signing, for instance. And so I'm not completely against everything the Raiders did, but it seems like maybe they're paying for sacks here, and it wasn't even last year. It was 2 years ago and 3 years ago for Paye. And I wonder if it just doesn't seem like that kind of guy I'm going to go out on the first day of free agency and spend, double-digit millions on. And that's just I might be wrong, but it's just a weird signing to me.
I think there were a couple of guys that had left me scratching my head a little bit for the Raiders in terms of their signings and how much they spent. We know that they wanted to lock up these players and they had the money to spend. And when you're spending on day one of free agency, you're never really getting any bargains, right? You are overspending, you're beating out other teams. So that's exactly what the Raiders ended up having to do here with Kwity Paye as well. Rich, any thoughts on Kwity Paye with the Raiders or any player that you think the teams made maybe a questionable decision in terms of being one of the worst signings so far of free agency?
Yeah, I actually agree with Ray on the Kwity Paye signing, even though my overall Raiders take is going to be kind of mixed because I think from a business stance is where I come out like a positive. They also have to spend a certain allotment of cap. Sure, they still have 80 million left on cap space this year.
We got to hit that floor. We got to hit that floor.
Yeah, we got to hit the floor. So I do think some of that is involved a little bit here, but I do agree from just this is not one of the guys I would have been like, all right, well, we got to spend it. We're going to spend it here because I just don't think there's going to be a lot of on-field return here based on this signing. So I do like that shout though, out of the guys that they signed.
Okay, how about you? Who do you think team overspent on, or was it just a poor signing in general?
Yeah, and I think mine falls under the same umbrella. You have a team that's way under the cap. They have to spend money, but I just think from a bargain perspective compared to what other players got at the position in this free agent class and in last year's free agent class, Alontae Taylor stands out as a pretty significant reach for me. He got the most money on the cornerback market. I think Jamel Dean and Jaelan Watson are objectively better players. And then you have to just be a little bit concerned because Alontae Taylor's coming off of the best year of his career, and it's because the New Orleans Saints moved him to the slot. He was basically a nickelback last year, played 600 snaps in the slot. The year prior to that, he played outside cornerback and gave the most receiving yards in the NFL. in 2024. So I think giving him over $20 million per year when you get guys like Jalen Watson and Jamel Dean, and, you know, you look at some of the contracts that were given out the year before to like Carlton Davis and, you know, Byron Murphy. And it's just like, it just stands out. Like this one, I feel like from a dollar perspective is just not going to be a lot of bang for your buck return, especially in that defense where Robert Saleh can coax out kind of like he can make like average cornerback play look a lot better because of the scheme he runs. And I know with the Jets, he had a lot of good cornerbacks, but with the 49ers, he made a lot. He got a lot of guys paid that definitely were more scheme fits than they were in terms of just objectively good, talented players.
I also kind of wonder that because like they signed Flott too, and Cordell Flott, who I feel very similarly about. Like I think these guys they're fine, but they're, you know, 40th best corner in the league, something like that. And they spent a lot of money on those two guys, but they are going to that Robert Saleh defense. So does it look a lot better because of who's coaching the defense? It doesn't look like a better signing. The other part about that is for those two guys specifically is it would be really hard for the Titans to get worse play out of their corners than they had last year. So just by the nature of who they're replacing, you know, that's probably a pretty good situation for those two guys. How about you, Warren? Who stands out to you?
To me, I know this is going to be a topic you guys both have some thoughts on, but it's Jaelan Phillips. And it's primarily just because clearly when you're spending that amount of money to sign a player, 4 years, $120 million, $30 million per year, $80 million guaranteed, you are overspending. We just discussed that. And so I think the Carolina Panthers, who are trying to build a contender around a quarterback still on his rookie deal, this contract is going to linger into the next several years when they have to make decisions about Bryce Young. And I just don't know if we're going to get that production out of Jaelan Phillips, especially after coming off of that career year prior to that having so many injuries, right? Tears his Achilles 2 years ago, comes back last year, tears his ACL. Two very difficult injuries for a pass rusher to overcome. Now, he looked solid last year, obviously a career year in fact, but he's also playing with one of the best defensive coordinators on one of the best defenses in the NFL. He's being put into the right positions. The rest of that line is able to occupy the focus of the opposing offensive coordinators and offensive linemen. And so he's having opportunities as a result of that from his time in Philadelphia. So just expecting him to be healthy, not having any of those other injuries come back to bite him, so to speak, not having any other injuries occur, which hasn't really happened in his career. And then, you know, it's more so just spending top dollar off of a career year. I just never really like the way that fits. And then I also never really like a team signing a guy like that off of that career year, sticking him in totally different defense, different scheme, different coordinator, different teammates. It's always difficult to just expect that production is just going to be right there like it was the prior year. And even if that production was there the prior year, is he worth that amount of money that they spent? So I just thought that one was a bit of an overpay. Not that I don't like the player. I just think they paid a lot to get his presence there in Carolina. Rich, any thoughts on that one?
Initially, it was one of the ones that kind of caught me off guard. And then, you know, Ray tapped the sign on the Shaq meme, was like, are you familiar with his game? And then I did some kind of digging. And then I ended up kind of like coming kind of full circle on it, because then I started to put together, you know, the defense, which Ray and I do the show where we break down the games. And we kind of both like talk about the back half of the year, how good Carolina's defense actually was. And Ejiro Evira, what he was able to get out of that unit. And I think like that fit plus Devin Lloyd, you know, plus Derek Brown, like this is a team, like they were dominant against the run the back half of the year. So if they can get any type of more pass rush, which is what they really needed, like this is a pass defense, I think that can take another step up. Now, big picture, the offensive side is where all the question marks come with this team. And like, but I did kind of come around kind of full circle. And then I also looked under the hood too, because initially I was like $30 million for Jaelan Phillips. Like this feels like a lot. And then I saw like over the past 10 years with inflation adjusted, it wasn't even a top 20 signing for an edge rusher per season. So I was like, oh, you know, I was kind of harsh on just the initial shock of like 4 for 120. And then kind of when I actually did some research, and then Ray kind of like hit me with like, did you know how good he was last year? It kind of like came out. It's like, all right, this actually could work out here and be something. But Carolina's eventually probably got the wrong quarterback, and we can have another conversation about that.
Yeah, I do think
Ray,
one of those we have to just like separate. We have to separate are we going to buy back in on Carolina? Like, are you building around someone that can actually win from like the individual signings? Because ultimately, if I look at the Panthers' individual signings, we'll talk more about them in the future. They needed help on defense. I think they have a very good defensive coordinator. Warren, to your point about, leaving a great defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, I think he's going to a great defensive coordinator. And so that helps. I think they got the best off-ball linebacker. You mentioned it, Rich, and Devin Lloyd. And I think they got the best edge rusher, because you're talking about he came off of a career season and all that production. But we should talk about what that level of production was. He had an 18.8% pressure rate. That was 5th among all qualified edge rushers last year. You could say, okay, well, he was doing that with the Eagles. He had an 18.7% rate with the Dolphins before he was traded. He was elite last year as a pass rusher. Even coming off those injuries, before those injuries, this was like a young up-and-coming pass rusher. So he's a young up-and-coming pass rusher, has those devastating injuries, comes back, and then has that season. Like, I think everything points to this guy just being really talented and a very good pass rusher. Are there injury questions? Sure, he had 2 really major injuries. Like, that's a worry. But I think he's exactly what the Panthers need. I think they have a very good defensive coordinator, and I think the Panthers' defense is a lot better than it was. Do I want to give anybody $30 million a year that's not, I don't know, Myles Garrett? I don't know, maybe not. But like, that's kind of where we are in the market. And I just think it was a fine contract for him.
Time will tell. We will see. Obviously, it's a significant amount of money there with a lot of guarantees. So if he can stay healthy and be productive like he was last year, it definitely, will pay for itself. But there are a lot of questions there to be answered. All right, guys, we've got a lot of other topics to get into here on some of our other shows. We're going to be talking about some of the best free agent signings, some of the ones that left us scratching our heads, and some of the teams that we think did the best. So make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you also go and check out Sharp Football. Subscribe to our newsletter over there. A lot of great information, a lot of great articles. We send them out weekly, especially this time of year around free agency. We're going to be hitting you with them. Drafts, mock drafts, everything that you would be interested in getting, we've got it to you, and it's free. So make sure you subscribe over at Sharp Football. Check out some of our other videos.